All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Finance Year. Today we have a special guest, Sudhakar, who's going to speak about software engineering and technology. We're doing a new edition and a series on technology, systems thinking, a lot of things that are obviously new and trendy in the last 12 months. There's been a lot of demand from the Tech Council group, from the Tech Investing group. It's a very exciting area. We'll talk a lot about e-commerce, his background. If you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out. We have the live feed going, so let us know what's on your mind, what you'd like to hear about, and if you have any questions about the industry, feel free to reach out during the live stream. So without further ado, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Let us know what's going on. Give us a quick background, a 36-second background of how you got into computer science, and we'll talk about your, how you hop, skipped, and jumped into Overstock.
Sure. Thanks, Vigar, for having me here. I grew up in a small town in Chennai, in India. Had good access to school that had computers in my high school. So that's where my interest in computers started. Those days we had programming in QBasic and whatnot. So loved those programming time. Then I took up computer science engineering, and part of completing the degree, I was lucky to get a job with Cognizant through the placement program. So that's how I started my career in software. Started with Cognizant, and I loved immediately solving real world problems through software. In fact, my very first project was optimizing, routes taken by medical representatives using a mapping engine. So, it got stuck with me saying, oh, we can solve greater problems using software. And from then on, it's been a journey. I went into banking industry where the experience was different. I was managing a credit card processing site, and it gave me a different exposure into how banking industry works. Then with Syntel, I stepped into the retail space, and this was a totally different world from what I had in life sciences and banking. In the sense that retail has a lot of things going on, like the needs are constantly evolving, and you got to be at a higher pace than what I experienced prior. And some of the problems that I was solving was mostly around supply chain technology. In fact, buy from store, buy from store, ship to your house, and currently with Overstock, I've been managing the post-purchase experience, optimizing the order management, and also making sure customers have a great delivery experience using our shopping site.
So when you were, just to go back, when you were at Burla, I saw you wrote something on cryptography. Now, did you touch anything in the world of, not cryptocurrency, but did you do anything more in the security space before you started working in real time and full time?
You mean in my college or?
Yeah, in college when you did software engineering at Burla.
Cryptography was part of that. Peer-to-peer communication always was challenging in terms of making sure that communication was secure. I think we have evolved a great deal from those days when I started in the security side. The algorithms have gotten stronger, and there are different protocols that you can use to make sure your communications are secure.
Got it. Okay, so let's talk about your transition from banking to retail. Banking when you started 15 plus years ago has involved a lot. So what was the mindset change from service architecture for financial services to supply chain? Those are two different types of delivery methods.
Yeah, I think banking has evolved as well. If you ask current banking software, I think they have adopted a lot of what retail is doing. But in those days, the major difference was the risk taking, right? Banking would invest a lot of money in buying products. For example, they might go to Oracle or IBM and buy a large suite of software. Whereas in retail, it was more open source. They were open to experimenting with a lot of open source technologies and, adopting some of the newer things that were coming into the market. In fact, even on the website, there were some JavaScript languages coming out. I think retail was one of the first industry to adopt and quickly jump onto that bandwagon. And now we are at a much modern UI architecture, and the same goes with backend architecture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the retail space, let's talk about e-commerce because you were in this well before the pandemic. How has the framework changed now? There's a lot more that's online. So how are you either, tell us about some of the back end problems, right? Connecting with the manufacturing, the inventory, the fulfillment, and the delivery. How have the pain points evolved in the last 3 years?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic has hit e-commerce in a good way, that more orders are being placed through the e-commerce channel, but also it comes with greater challenges. Like you said, the supply chain is an issue. When are the products going to be in stock, and how are we going to deliver these products to the customer? Like I mentioned, delivery experience is one of my area, and making sure we provide a promise date to the customer is key. And when things like the supply chain problems and the carriers that I talked about come into play, those accuracy take a big hit. Now you got to get into the space of, hey, how do I optimize and look at those changing parameters and making sure I give the best experience to the customer. And at the same time, you look at what are the customers looking for, and are we providing those details to them proactively instead of them calling our customer care for issues or whatnot. So reducing those friction points, making sure we proactively connect with the customers during their order processing journey is critical.
Okay, so give us a success story of what you guys have done. Overstock has done very well for a variety of reasons in the last few years. Not talking about T0 and what the CEO has done, but Overstock itself, it's been a successful e-commerce business. I've used it. I've bought from there many years ago. So talk about how they've either differentiated themselves in a world of Amazon and other guys that are just over flooding the marketplace. Is it service? Is it the technology? What's the edge right now from the front end to back end?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's a lot about focus. In the past, we have had a variety of areas where we would explore, but in the last couple of years with the new CEO, I think there's been an increased focus and alignment within the organizations. When we are working on large projects, it is somewhat tied to what the company wants, and making sure it's moving the needle in the right direction. I think focus and alignment is a great thing. And the number two is, we have always been a technology company. I'm proud to claim as a modern technology company. So we were quick to adapt to newer technology that comes to the market, making sure that helps our business. In fact, we drive our projects through ROI, making sure we get a good bang for the buck for the technology that we are adopting, and making sure it helps better experience for our customers.
Got it. So what are some problems that you guys are either addressing this year or you haven't had a chance to address yet?
Yep, great question. Overstock has been in the business for 20 years. Part of that comes with some legacy systems that were built a few years back, but you don't have the priority or the resources to go modify things. So there's going to be a balance between, hey, how much do I invest in creating new solutions versus how do I modernize our current infrastructure and software systems. In fact, one of the areas that I'm focusing on is around moving away from point-to-point messaging architecture to more event-driven architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier said than done, because what point-to-point messaging or using database as an integration mechanism provided was durable. Like there were less chances of failure. Systems were more durable and reliable. But what that means is it's also tightly coupled. It affects directly towards how soon could I get a solution to the users. So now we are moving towards an event-driven, which enables us to create this loosely coupled architecture, and you are able to remove any bottlenecks in your critical path quickly with an event-driven architecture, so that each subsystem takes care of reacting to that event rather than you solving for the subsystem.
Got it. So I came across an interesting stat earlier this week about mainframe. You speak about legacy systems. So, a lot of bigger companies are still using mainframe technology versus the cloud. Give us an idea either of Overstock or people you see in e-commerce that are they just don't have the cutting edge. They don't have that communication, that frictionless communication in the back end, or just in the system, so that people can talk to each other without obstacles.
Right. Mainframe has its own place. I would say that it still has a role in some of the critical systems. Banking uses it for card processing and whatnot. So that's going to be a role. But you got to find the use case and find out what your SLA is or SLO is, service level objectives for your application, and then say, is mainframe the right technology for this purpose? If I don't meet those objectives, how is it going to cost me in my business? For example, if it takes 2 months to build a project in mainframe versus 2 weeks to build a Java-based application, you're saving those 6 weeks. How does that 6 weeks translate into revenue dollars, or getting more features on your shopping site, right? So those are the type of the analysis one should do, and then say, okay, where is the bang for the buck to implement that project? And secondly, these days you have this open source softwares that cost almost next to nothing, whereas in mainframes you're going to pay some vendor X amount of money. So you got to balance, hey, do I build versus buy, and then make those conscious decisions on what is the optimal route to take.
Right. That makes sense. There's still high demand for it. So what problem would you want to fix with the magic wand? What's a really big problem that just haven't been able to tackle, whether it's industry or vertical related?
Automation first strategy, I would say. When you look at some of the things that I mentioned, one magic pill is having automation in place. When I do have several systems that are newer and built in the new pipeline landscape, those have automation in place, and that helps us to move faster with releasing features. Whereas you look at some of the legacy system, it's difficult to go back and plug in automation. There could be some manual process that's stuck between, or it's difficult to get an end-to-end automation in place because of how systems interact with each other. So if you can rebuild it from scratch, when you can incorporate those automations into place, not just say feature testing. It could be your deploy process. It could be your security review process. Building automation in each of those life cycle of software development helps you to be more efficient and remove those frictional blocks for the development team.
Now, when you talk about automation, are you talking about just when a customer purchases something and the transaction happens from delivery till the endpoint, or are you talking about just the software development piece of building new workflow or something?
I'm talking about the software development workflow automation.
Got it. Okay. And how is the the hiring situation? Where do you see the demand in the industry, or like where do you guys either need people, or do you see people like developing new skills because it's a growing area?
People developing new skills. I always thought that technology will constantly be evolving. Like I said, JavaScript frameworks have evolved in the last 5 years tremendously. So it's difficult for somebody to get stuck on a single technology and then say, hey, this will solve every problem for the next 20 years. Not going to happen. So key is to adapt to the user needs or the use case, and then say, hey, how do I solve this problem with the best technology available? So we need people who are adaptable, are having that mindset to learn and adapt to the growing needs. One good example is DevOps that we are trying to change, and DevOps is a culture mindset. And it's not just about providing tools and processes to teams. It's also about changing the mindset of people to say, hey, I own this. I'm going to make sure my software is usable and productive in the production.
Got it. Yeah, that's a really big opportunity in the DevOps space. So what book are you reading today? What are you doing either for personal or business or just technology? What are you reading? What's on your mind?
I'm reading a book called Accelerate. It talks about some of the DevOps principles that I mentioned about. It goes into what are the best practices around continuous delivery. How high performing companies fare against low performers. What are the characteristics that differentiate them? It also talks about how do you introduce this culture into the teams. What are the factors that affect a team's productivity. at the end of the day, you don't want burnt out developers, right? So you got to have the right balance between tools, architecture, and culture in place so that teams can thrive in that environment.
Perfect. That's good. I'm putting it on my wish list. So there you have it, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to always reach out. If you got questions, you can ask them now or follow up with Sudhakar or myself afterwards. We just talked about software architecture, the challenges with the retail e-commerce, the industry, and the hiring demand and needs all across the spectrum. So let's wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, Sudhakar, again, for the interview. It's great. And if you want more, follow up, subscribe to the Finance Here, and check in with us very soon. We'll have more coming up in this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. It was a pleasure.
Take care.